This week, President Trump hosted Turkish President Erdoğan at the White House to discuss Turkish opposition to the United States arming Kurdish fighters against ISIS, as well as a proposed peace plan for Syria. Turkey has a bit of a tricky relationship with the United States, existing at a geographical and ideological intersection between the Islamic world and the secular democratic West. Geopolitics isn't my expertise, but in my experience, our alliance with Turkey is often justified with some type of comparison to the alternative, an enemy of my enemy is my friend type justification. Well, sure, Turkey does jail journalists, but at least they help us fight ISIS. Well, sure, they amended their constitution to give Erdoğan near dictatorial power, and yeah, the election was shady, and yeah, the referendum barely passed, but it's still more democratic than ISIS. Well, better than ISIS isn't a sufficient standard to be my friend. I need something more. And so do several U.S. senators, including Republicans, who sent a letter this week to President Trump prior to his meeting with Erdoğan, noting Erdoğan's assault on the rule of law and his stifling of fundamental rights, including free speech, and quashing of opposition to his undemocratic actions. These senators urged President Trump to make support for Turkish democracy and human rights a priority when meeting with the Turkish leader. But President Trump didn't apply such pressure, at least at the public portion of this meeting, stressing only the importance of our alliance with Turkey.
I look forward to working together with President Erdoğan on achieving peace and security in the Middle East, on confronting the shared threats, and on working toward a future of dignity and safety for all of our people.
Erdoğan's commitment to dignity and safety for the Turkish people is questionable. And after what happened later that day, we should question his commitment to dignity and safety for Americans as well. After Erdoğan's meeting with President Trump, a protest developed outside the Turkish Embassy in D.C. These protesters were holding signs condemning Erdoğan's treatment of Turkey's Kurdish minority and the jailing of a Kurdish political leader. And they can be heard chanting, "Erdoğan, terrorist." Erdoğan, terrorist, Erdoğan, terrorist. And while there are some minor scuffles breaking out throughout this footage, and it's tough to tell who exactly initiated what, it should be noted that generally, protesters are sticking to the opposite side of the street from the embassy, and DC police are stopping Erdoğan's men from crossing the street to advance on the protesters. But not for long. Shortly thereafter, DC police were overwhelmed and a bloody brawl erupted. Amid the chaos, it can be hard to tell who's who, but generally speaking, the uniformed police are DC police trying to mediate between the men in suits who are Erdoğan's security personnel, and the protesters are in street clothes. Throughout the scuffle, you can see Erdoğan's men kicking downed protesters and repeatedly attempting to cross police lines in aggression. In total, there were 11 injuries, including a police officer and 2 Secret Service agents who were there ironically to protect foreign dignitaries, with 9 people sent to the hospital, though all have since been released. There were also 2 arrests, 2 U.S. citizens who were part of the protest group, for assault against the police. And what was Erdoğan himself doing during all of this chaos? The extent to which he may have issued orders is unclear. But one thing is crystal clear. He was right there in his car at the embassy, calmly watching the violence escalate with no apparent attempt to intervene and stop the aggression of his men. Based on the footage I've seen, it seems clear to me that Erdoğan's guys were the aggressors, that they initiated the violence with lawfully demonstrating protesters who were not on Turkish embassy property. And that's consistent with commentary from witnesses who say it was Erdoğan's security detail who attacked. That's consistent with testimony from the DC Police Department.
Yesterday afternoon, we witnessed what appeared to be a brutal attack on peaceful protesters at the Turkish Ambassador's residence in the 1600 block of 23rd Street Northwest.
And that's mostly consistent with the brief statement issued by the State Department, who characterized this incident as a violent response to free speech. And what does Erdoğan say? What does Turkey say? All we have is a very brief statement issued by the Turkish Embassy, in which they characterize the protesters as affiliated with a terrorist organization, the PKK, which has had armed conflict with the Turkish state seeking rights for the Kurdish minority for decades. The statement continues that these protesters had gathered without permit to provoke the Turks aggressively, that the violence and injuries were in self-defense, and the result of unpermitted, provocative demonstration. A few problems with this explanation. First, unpermitted demonstration. Well, sorry, Turkey. I thought this was America. And in the capital of the land of the free, we will demonstrate how we see fit. Thank you. In the case of larger demonstrations, permitting may be necessary, but how about DC police officers enforce those laws? Especially when you acknowledge that none of this took place on Turkish Embassy property, only the quote, immediate vicinity. Second, the Turkish statement notes the association between the protesters and the PKK without establishing that as true. Indeed, the protesters deny that association. But even if it is true, so what? We don't restrict speech based on association. We don't decide who gets to speak based on who your friends are. Third, the Turks complain about the provocative nature of the demonstration. That is the point. That is why we protect the right. We don't protect the right for people to stand on the other side of the street and say, "Yay, Erdoğan! You're so cool, Erdoğan! Can we please be friends, Erdoğan? Can we get an autograph? Can we have a selfie?" No. The protection is there for 2 fingers up and a "Hey, Erdoğan, why don't you on this fat you piece of motherfucker? You." So yeah, Erdoğan can suck a fat one. But actually, in this whole situation, I think I might be more upset with the White House than I am with the Turks. Turk's gonna Turk. But that doesn't mean we have to give them an infinite leash to do it. As of Friday, May 19th at noon Mountain Time, the time I am speaking into this camera, 3 full days after this assault, the White House has issued no statement on this incident. Several members of the Senate have called for an apology from Turkey. The State Department has said it is communicating its concerns to Turkey, but nothing from the man in charge. And to me, that is as unacceptable as the violence itself. Let's be clear about what happened. A foreign leader came to our country on a diplomatic visit, and during that visit, his men assaulted lawfully protesting political opposition on our soil. And it wasn't just our people Turkey assaulted. Erdoğan and his men assaulted a fundamental freedom on which we do not compromise, and for which our parents have fought and have died. I can accept varying degrees of retaliation from the Trump administration, but I cannot accept non-response. I cannot accept Erdoğan's behavior as a simple cost of doing business. I thought the whole purpose of allying with Erdoğan in the first place was defeating brutal global authoritarianism. If he brings that when he visits, why is he visiting at all? And what are we protecting by treating him cordially? I'd be happy to see the United States go as far as to rescind diplomatic immunity for every Turkish official involved. I would be happy to see them all prosecuted to the full extent of the law. But I understand that would come at a diplomatic cost. So I could be persuaded to lower our action simply to demand an unqualified apology from Erdoğan himself and a pledge never to let this happen again. But Mr. President, what I cannot accept is crickets. What I cannot accept is non-action. What I cannot accept is the willful sacrifice of fundamental American values in the name of peace with those who don't respect them. Such an alliance asks us to sacrifice far too much. So I implore you, Mr. President, please do the right thing. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to come hang out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Okay, bye.